And no way not to be sensitive to that news after what we've watched the last several days out of Kenya. Of course, the deadly mall attack there, a lot of international attention now on al-Shabab, that's the terrorist group linked to al-Qaeda, taking to Twitter now and continuing to spew all sorts of propaganda, making a lot of different wild claims, even as Kenyan forces continue to work their way through the mall to secure the area. It certainly has been a confusing situation, but albeit it's been a deadly situation. Captain Bob Wells, retired Navy captain, served as National Security Advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, joins us now. So here we have these stories together, not necessarily related, Captain Wells, but it brings up the question, what do we do better? Now that we've seen this in Kenya, what is our next step?
Our next step is to recall the most important thing about preparation, and that is it takes a network to defeat a network. Our networks, both at the federal, state, local, counterterrorism efforts, law enforcement efforts, just have to be better. I think one of the more important things about the forensic investigations that are occurring right now in Kenya with the FBI in cooperation with the Kenyan government is that we're going to know more about al-Shabab and why these particular attacks, why this particular location was planned. The most important thing, I think, for the United States to do is to continue to go new day, as I say, to really look at this current situation and realize that al-Shabab is dangerous. It's a jihadi network. It's one of the al-Qaeda affiliated networks, associated movements that are all part of the larger al-Qaeda plan. And that should be a serious concern for us as we continue to look at what we can do to deny, disrupt, and defeat the terrorist networks.
The terrorist group is actually doing an interview with the Associated Press, and I'm just getting a few headlines for that. In this email exchange, apparently al-Shabab said that the jihadis carried out a meticulous vetting process so that Muslims would not be harmed. They also said that foreigners were a legitimate target and confirmed that the gunmen separated Muslims from others and let the Muslims go. That's not necessarily always been central to the conversation over the last several days, Captain Wells, about this group. If that is their ideology, if being Muslim or not Muslim is central to who they kill and do not kill, how do we have a more honest conversation about what we do to disrupt the network?
I think we need to have an honest conversation. We need to be very realistic about it. I think also it's important to note that Ayman al-Zawahiri just this last week issued a new fatwa which speaks to the actual modalities within jihadism. And in my view, and just listening to what you mentioned, Jenna, I think they have adopted many of those particular modalities within the Zawahiri and the jihadi methodology. That's an important consideration. I think that's important news for us to really consider.
Well, especially, I don't mean to interrupt, but going back to your first point of the network, we're seeing a network of, there's some coordination between these different groups, who they're listening to, how their purpose is more global rather than local. You mentioned that we need to increase our networks. How do we do that specifically during a time when there's sequestration, all these budget concerns? Where do we invest? How do we prioritize?
We need to really invest in our law enforcement, our homeland security efforts. We also need to take advantage of the Somali diaspora that's here in the United States, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Columbus, Ohio, even Lewiston, Maine. There's quite a few of the really good Somali folks that have come over, as you recall, after 20 years of civil war in Somalia. They're good people, they're hardworking people, but we have a concern with regard to the youth in particular, not only in Somalia but also here, that could be disenfranchised. Having that dialogue, having that conversation with the Somali diaspora is going to give us better information with regard to determining if there is a threat. This is a real new day awakening, I think, for Islamic terrorism and global jihad. It needs to be taken very seriously. There's things that are different than they were in 2001. The internet is facilitating communication. We need to reduce the risk in the areas of recruiting, financing. We need to understand what the leaders of the diaspora community are telling us more clearly, making sure the National Counterterrorism Center has the best information possible so that we inform law enforcement, keep the communication open so that we can try to detect these and predict these particular areas and actually come up with risk mitigation strategies in our own civil society.
Captain Wells, nice to have you on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jenna. Good to see you.